Last week, after the Supreme Court allowed Texas Senate Bill 8 to take effect, I said that the Justice Department was evaluating all options to protect the constitutional rights of women and other persons. Today, after careful assessment of the facts and the law, the Justice Department has filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas. Our position is set out in detail in our complaint. Its basis is as follows. SB 8 bans nearly all abortions in the state after 6 weeks of pregnancy, before many women even know they are pregnant, and months before a pregnancy is viable. It does so even in cases of rape, sexual abuse, or incest. And it further prohibits any effort to aid the doctors who provide pre-viability abortions or the women who seek them. The act is clearly unconstitutional under long-standing Supreme Court precedent. Those precedents hold, in the words of Planned Parenthood versus Casey, that, quote, regardless of whether exceptions are made for particular circumstances, a state may not prohibit any woman from making the ultimate decision to terminate her pregnancy before viability. Texas does not dispute that its statute violates Supreme Court precedent. Instead, the statute includes an unprecedented scheme to, in the Chief Justice's words, quote, insulate the state from responsibility, close quote. It does not rely on the state's executive branch to enforce the law, as is the norm in Texas and everywhere else. Rather, the statute deputizes all private citizens, without any showing of personal connection or injury, to serve as bounty hunters, authorized to recover at least $10,000 per claim from individuals who facilitate a woman's exercise of her constitutional rights. The obvious and expressly acknowledged intention of this statutory scheme is to prevent women from exercising their constitutional rights by thwarting judicial review for as long as possible. Thus far, the law has had its intended effect. Because the statute makes it too risky for an abortion clinic to stay open, abortion providers have ceased providing services. This leaves women in Texas unable to exercise their constitutional rights and unable to obtain judicial review at the very moment they need it. This kind of scheme to nullify the Constitution of the United States is one that all Americans, whatever their politics or party, should fear. If it prevails, it may become a model for action in other areas, by other states, and with respect to other constitutional rights and judicial precedents. Nor need one think long or hard to realize the damage that would be done to our society if states were allowed to implement laws that empower any private individual to infringe on another's constitutionally protected rights in this way. The United States has the authority and the responsibility to ensure that no state can deprive individuals of their constitutional rights through a legislative scheme specifically designed to prevent the vindication of those rights.
Finally, the Attorney General Merrick Garland announced that the Department of Justice will be suing the state of Texas over SB 8, which banned all abortions after 6 weeks and created a system wherein private citizens were deputized to rat out women seeking abortions to collect $10,000 bounties. And what's most important to note here is that even though conservatives on the Supreme Court will hide behind the defense that they didn't rule on the merits, but rather the procedural thresholds of the case, the functional result of this case is that women will be prevented from exercising their constitutional right to a safe and legal abortion. And so the DOJ was absolutely right to step in, while the state of Texas so egregiously, aggressively restricted the constitutional rights of the women of that state. What's even more insidious about all of this is that those conservatives on the Supreme Court that allowed this unconstitutional law to stand did so knowing full well that the method used to justify it was a scheme. It took the enforcement mechanism away from government officials and put it into the hands of ordinary citizens. All of whom will now be deputized to rat out women for the crime of exercising their constitutional rights. That enforcement mechanism was specifically designed to undermine the court and its precedent. And instead of recognizing that and squashing it like they should have, those conservatives yielded to it. Why? Because this is a top-down, coordinated effort among the far-right theocrats from the state legislature all the way to the far-right theocrats that sit on the bench to twist themselves into pretzels to ensure that women are ruled by the strong arm of the government of Texas. But sure, small government. Got it. By the way, Republicans love talking about slippery slopes, like how the Affordable Care Act released the cat panels and how COVID vaccines released the tyrannical government takeovers. In reality, neither of those things happened, and they won't. But this Republican law will undoubtedly set the stage so that any hot-button political issue can be enforced not by government officials or law enforcement, but rather by some vigilante system where every single citizen is deputized to turn over people engaging in activities that don't comport with their own personal or religious beliefs. And this won't just benefit Republicans. What if Democrats in every blue state ban certain firearms and then pass laws putting the onus on all citizens to rat out those who remain in possession of those guns? Same concept, only instead of a hot-button issue for the right, it's for the left. If you can look me in the eye and say that the right wouldn't have a collective fainting spell over that, then you are kidding yourself. And while I assume that something like that may sound appealing to those in favor of gun control, just as I assume that SB 8 is appealing to the pro-life crowd, you have to be able to recognize the inherent danger of pitting citizens against citizens.
Way into the first year of the Biden administration, Biden is finally asking 11 officials that were appointed by
to carry out politicians' partisan agendas in the streets. It is dangerous, it is unconstitutional, and it will undoubtedly tear neighborhoods, states, and this country apart. If only Republicans were able to see beyond desperately trying to enact a wholly unpopular agenda, they'd be able to recognize the long-term consequences of what they're doing. The fact is that whether or not you agree with SB 8 is not the issue here, although I should note that 70% of Americans, including a majority of even Catholics, do agree that Roe should be the law of the land. The issue is that in a democracy, we're not supposed to be ruled by politicians who implement aggressively unpopular legislation against the will of the majority, in a way that furthermore undermines the very Constitution that those politicians swore an oath to uphold. It shouldn't happen to benefit Republicans, and it shouldn't happen to benefit Democrats. This isn't something that should be cheered on by anyone. It's something that should be full-throatedly condemned, and the DOJ should do everything in its power to ensure that we're governed by the Constitution and not by far-right ideologues looking to shove their religious views down everyone's throats. If you enjoyed that video and you're looking for a deeper dive, check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Cohen. It's a no-BS look at the top stories of the week, along with interviews with the top names in politics, like Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, and more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Cohen. Want to see more videos like this one? Click the subscribe link right here on the screen to join more than 1 million people who have already subscribed to my channel. And finally, to donate to my Don't Be a Mitch Fund, where I'm raising money for a whole raft of different voter outreach and voter registration groups in the closest states ahead of midterms in 2022, including Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Texas. You can find that link on this screen as well. Thanks for watching.
The Biden administration moved to oust several Trump holdovers, including Sean Spicer Academy boards, while the former president himself issued a statement claiming that, let me see if I have this right, Confederate General Robert E. Lee would have won the war in Afghanistan. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. There's a simple truth about our history, which has somehow been muddied through decades of self-serving revisionism by racists and apologists for white supremacy, and that is that the Confederacy was a movement of anti-American traitors and slavers who tried to destroy this country. I can't believe that even has to be said, but apparently it does. I mean, there are people out there who don't even know what the Civil War was about, like, for example, the former president of the United States.
People don't know, the Civil War, if you think about it, why? People don't ask that question. But why was there the Civil War? Why could that one not have been worked out?
Yeah, people don't ask the question, why was there the Civil War? Just like we don't ask, how many sides does a triangle have? Or is a snake a reptile? Because we learned all that in grade school. At least those of us who weren't following our dad to construction sites to watch him yell at immigrants. What do you mean Don't ask that question. It was a white supremacist rebellion against the government, not a fight between my wife and her sister. What are they mad about? Don't ask. I mean, I know Donald Trump doesn't live in our reality, but it's still interesting to find out stuff about his reality. Like, I guess in his reality, the local library doesn't only have one book on the Civil War called What the Heck Was All This Nonsense About? Also, I like that he wants to know why could that not have been worked out. Yeah, why couldn't you get the top Union generals and the top Confederate generals in a room and stick Andy Cohen in the middle and talk it down over some skinny marks? I mean, seriously, you don't have to be the chair of the college history department to know that the Confederacy and its leaders were evil. Hell, you just had to have a substitute teacher in high school who forgot the lesson plan and played Glory on Laserdisc while he put his head down on the desk and took a nap. Yeah, sure, all the other kids secretly passed notes and played games, but me, I was watching. Total glory stand. You might say that for one magical year, I was deep in a glory hole. I'd prefer if you didn't. Come on, Freeman, Washington, Brower, yes, please. Look, I like the men and Matthew Broderick's character, just like Ferris Bueller. And before every battle, the general would say, Colonel Shaw. Unfortunately, part of the reason we have to keep stating that obvious fact about the evil of the Confederacy is the reality of the Civil War that shortly after the end of the war, the destruction of racist revisionist lost cause movement rose up to cast the leaders of the Confederacy as a noble gentleman instead of the defeated traitors and white supremacists that they were. Nowadays, lots of them don't even learn about Reconstruction and the post-Civil War periods in history class. I mean, I can't believe people are worried about critical race theory when my history textbook jumped from the Civil War to the Great Depression, and in between there was one page about William Howard Taft getting stuck in a bathtub. Now, I know that story is possible, and that it didn't even start to spread until decades later, but it's also super funny to me that someone went out of their way to make it up and spread it around about a dead guy. I mean,